Welcome to Everything CPA and Private Equity, where we unpack the evolving relationship between accounting firms, private equity, and other strategics. I'm David Wolfskehl, a partner at Whitman Transition Advisors.
And I'm Phil Whitman, CEO of Whitman Transition Advisors. And we've chatted with more than 150 private equity groups. We've actually closed over 40 transactions with those private equity groups. And we're bringing you firsthand insights from the front lines.
And whether you're exploring your first deal, putting your toe in the water, refining your strategy, we're here to guide you with real stories, expert advice, actionable takeaways. Let's dive in. Welcome everybody to a special edition of Everything CPA and Private Equity. And our goal is to share with leadership thoughts, ideas, people who have done it, people who have decided not to do it, so that you can make a great decision for you, your firm, your family. And recently, the Wall Street Journal had an article where they kind of warned accounting firms about PE and about what happened in healthcare. And when I read the article, and Phil texted me almost at the exact same moment, so he was in alignment. When we read the article, we were quite surprised because Phil's met with 200 firms. We've worked with great people like Reyes, and we'll introduce you in a moment. And we've heard great ideas from these new players in the marketplace, and we've never heard cutting corners is how we're going to add value and make more money. And so, this is really to discuss quality control within a CPA firm and what does happen after you accept private equity money. And again, like we say on every edition, private equity is wealth management, it's family offices, two people who have done it before. There is no true definition of what that means. So, Phil, I know you've worked the most with platform. Why don't you introduce Reyes real quick and we'll hop on.
So, one of the interesting things, and Reyes, if I say anything that's not correct, don't be embarrassed to correct me, but Reyes is not a private equity firm, okay? He has a rather unique story where I believe he built off the backbone of his father's CPA firm.
Small CPA firm.
And he saw some magic in this and has really taken it to the next level and has done, I will say, he does private equity-like transactions. And frequently when we introduce him, obviously, there's hardly a firm out there that says, oh, I just want to meet one person and one person is it. They're all talking to multiple opportunities that they have. And frequently, Reyes, with the platform accounting group model they've built, has bested some of our private equity clients again and again and again. And he does have a little bit of secret sauce there. But I think the question is relevant to him as well, because obviously in the aggregation model that he's building, one can ask the same question. How are you making it more profitable? Are you cutting corners? Beware, this guy's giving you a lot of money, but he's going to destroy your CPA firm. No. But Reyes, it's been great working with you. And I must give a shout out to Noah. Your young front man, not that you're old, but he's even younger than you.
Sure.
But we love working with him. We love working with you, and welcome. So happy to have you here with us today.
Yeah, so fantastic to be here. And I think obviously a timely, relevant topic. So well worth a special edition. I think, the article raises important questions and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, great, Reyes. So, our first impression was, wow, that's not what we're seeing. That's not what we think. You read the article, Wall Street Journal, still, a newspaper, but highly credible and, a leader in the world today. So what were some of those first thoughts as you were reading that article?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing that came to mind is like context and nuance matter, right? And that's typically, the case with anything that is, has some degree of complexity to it. And so ultimately, does the article raise important questions? Absolutely. And I think those are valid questions. They need to be thought through. They need to be addressed, but I think kind of coming out of the gate with, kind of a clear position that this could or will be rather, that it will degrade quality, I think is just slightly misinformed or majorly misinformed, and I think an overly simplified kind of view of what's happening and why it's happening in the space. So my initial reaction is context matters a lot in this discussion.
And then, you've been doing this for a decade plus, really. Is that correct? So this is not a new game for you as some of the other players are. Is that correct?
That's right. And as Phil said, it really started with my family's firm, as a second generation firm that had started at the kitchen table with my grandfather and his close community of friends. My dad kind of formalized that into a business, and that was the business I grew up in. And so really what gave rise to the idea and the genesis of Platform was all of these challenges and issues that particularly smaller, what I call boutique firms, were facing. I think that scale, consolidation, outside capital, I would also, again, people kind of throw around private equity as this like very specific term. It's not a ubiquitous term. It means a lot of different things. And I prefer even just private capital, right? Because it really is just how are you capitalizing your business? And how are you using that capital to be able to drive growth or solve problems? And so Platform was really born very organically at looking at, the 4 or 5 problems that we were facing at our family firm and saying, okay, how can scale, how can additional capital help us solve those problems? And I think ultimately that's really the conversation point, is that there are very pervasive issues across the industry. They tend to look and feel very similar regardless of the firm's size. And so how can private capital help drive solutions to that? And I think that's really where the conversation needs to be. And then in the backdrop, you do have to ask yourself the question of what is private equity's kind of model and influence on operational, and structural changes that might take place. But I would say, that really takes a back seat to, can this be a solution to industry-wide challenges?
And so, this, at least in the short term, has been solutions for some industry-wide challenge. I also know as you're building this firm, you're putting in a lot of smaller firms into a larger platform. And
Yep.
so as you saw these firms from a QC point of view, you describe a little bit what you might typically see before a transaction, and then they're on their platform, and how has their quality mindset changed, perhaps?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, again, just scale and resources, right? When we typically focus on firms that are anywhere from, 2 to maybe up to 10 partners. And when you are smaller, on the smaller end, right, or on the boutique end, you don't necessarily have resources for internal quality control that's dedicated exclusively for that, for in-house, general counsel or compliance. The ability to kind of share best practices is limited, right? Because you tend to be on an island. And so when you think about what a standalone firm has just in terms of resource, it's not the same. And I think immediately when someone comes into our group, we have a risk assessment team, right? We have a head of compliance. We have opportunities to share best practices and an internal, QC team, right? That's exclusively focused on this. So particularly at the boutique end of the market, sometimes things can be a little bit of the wild, wild west. And we've seen all kinds of things kind of pre-close and when firms are coming in. And maybe that's just, I think it's really largely a function of most of these firms have just been redline capacity for the last decade. And when you have, that type of situation, you don't really have excess room to start to think about how do you actually improve or form committees and those types of things. It's like, how do I just get the work done? Right. Yeah. So the minute you come into a group like ours, you have access to that scaled capability. And then you also have capital, again, to go invest into that headcount. You have a network effect that happens with shared resources and mind share and best practices. So unequivocally, in my mind, if done correctly, it's a boost to the quality control.
And if you're looking at ways to improve EBITDA, profitability, or cash flow, cutting corners would not be one of the first ways that you would say, here's how we're going to solve all our profitability problems. I mean, is that a fair statement as well?
Yeah, it is. And I guess you could do it. It would be short-lived, right? Because you think about our business, it's high degree of trust, high degree of long-term relationship. And quality matters a lot. And so you might be able to kind of skip a few corners early on, but that's going to very quickly come back and kind of bite you, so to speak. The other thing I would say, and this is, we're just incredibly fortunate to be in a position where as firms and as professionals, the demand for our services just far outweighs the supply. So anyone who's coming into the industry thinking like, oh, I'm going to drive, earnings growth through cost savings doesn't understand the abundance of opportunity that's out there. And so it's unnecessary to even think about cost savings, because it's all about how do you build capacity to take on more work? How do you drive better outcomes? One of the things that happens when people come onto a platform like ours is now they have an expansion of service offerings, right? At our end of the market, you might have a firm who just does one or two service offerings really, really well, and they have lots of demand for other things from those clients. And so it's really not even part of the conversation, candidly, on our end. And I doubt it is in other groups as well, because it's really about, it's a race to capacity. Let's get capacity, let's deliver expanded services, and let's execute high quality services, and the growth can take it from there.
And that was a conversation we really never heard. And that's why we were so surprised by the article, maybe needed more context for it. So
yeah, look, I mean, private equity, I spent some time on Wall Street on kind of the other side of the table as, an M&A banker, and different firms have different reputations. They have different growth philosophies. They have different value philosophies. They have different hold periods in terms of when they think, liquidity needs and should come. So again, really important questions to ask. And, the operating philosophy, the time horizon of these funds, those things all matter, but totally unfair to kind of just, brushstroke the entire industry with one kind of philosophy or approach. And so again, don't mind the question being asked, but it does matter, and nuance matters.
You're seeing that you have, I'm going to ask this question,
Sure.
really a significant amount of operational control, right? You have a capital partner, but the day-to-day is run by professionals, right? Not by necessarily the capital partners. Is that fair?
That's right. Absolutely. And particularly, I can speak obviously mostly just to who our partners are, but we've chosen to take capital from family offices, which typically have, very long-term investment horizons. They tend to be very light in the operational touch. And they generally partner with executive and existing management teams who are already kind of been in the business for a long time. And our capital partner checks all of thof boxes. And it does bring up an interesting conversation as well, which is part of what the shift that private equity is helping drive is moving away from kind of a traditional partner-centric model into a much more operationalized, systemized model. And that takes time, it takes capital, it's necessary given kind of the talent landscape and the next generation of leadership and what, they value and what they want. And so again, private equity, private capital can be a powerful fuel for that structural change that is necessary to take place as the industry evolves.
And I think that standardization also reduces potential risk.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When you have, tighter controls and everything from, engagement letters to, final review, and you start to kind of just, again, get best practices and that standardization, that I'm a big believer that process does drive quality. And so when we come in, we do look to, partner with these firms to, improve those processes, systematize things, not only in part to kind of scale our ability to manage, a larger firm, but also to improve, quality and outcomes.
I mean, Phil, we've seen a million times, right? Each partner effectively does their own thing, right? That's how Joe does it.
Yeah.
And it's okay. That's not a high quality, that's taking some risk, right?
Sure. And when you think about it, again, at this boutique end of the market, who's reviewing that work? I mean, we've walked into situations where a partner, and they've been great partners with us, and they're the first to say, hey, I would love someone to kind of look at my stuff because no one's done that for 10 years, and so they're kind of like, oh, now I'm having a nice review and a good quality conversation, all done with this spirit of improving the client experience, improving the outcomes.
Reyes, everything I've been seeing to the point you just made is so, there are just such glaring errors in comparing medical or dental practice to the CPA firm arena. Not only you that have implemented, obviously, best practices, you've probably enhanced most of the organizations that have joined you, and maybe one or two have had some interesting processes that, maybe we should do this.
That's
but
right.
It's probably a combination of the best of the best. And if anything, I think what I've been seeing is number one, an investment in technology that's
Yep.
gonna, you know, enhance quality, whether it's looking at things like independence or,
Yep.
I mean, even just when you look at the fact, and I don't know if you're doing much of this, but obviously part of the playbook of some of the other strategic investors out there is let's go offshore,
Mhm.
so that we don't have partners preparing tax returns.
That's right.
It's
That's
like,
right.
okay,
Yeah.
I've walked into smaller firms and I've been saying this from doing this for 17 years. I've been saying it for 17 years. I'm amazed when I walk into a CPA firm and I see, a partner back then that was 15 years older than me. Now I've turned into that older guy. So, it's like I'd be like 50 years old and I see like a 65-year-old putting numbers in boxes. And I'd say,
Right.
what are you doing?
That's right.
And he's like,
Yep.
oh, we don't have people. We don't have
Yep.
people,
Yep.
the crisis. So, we always saw partners working down. And then, so then you got a partner preparing the return. And then who's there to review the return? To your point, I'm glad that someone's now looking over my shoulder and, checking my work. Because there were cases where it's like the guy that prepared it is the guy that signed it, is the guy that
Yep.
sent it to the client now. And if there was a mistake because he was doing it at 2 a.m,
Yep.
there was a
Yep.
mistake. I see you guys making our profession a lot better. I mean, I think quality is going up. I think, the investments that you're making, and it actually, like when I read that, maybe because I am an ardent supporter of this, not in a hammer and nail sort of way. Obviously, different flavors for all different clients. It's not like merge, private equity,
Right.
private equity. It is an important conversation, but we listen to our clients and whatever it is, they want to remain independent, we'll help them remain independent. But they need to know what's going on out there. And I think people need to know that private equity is not hurting our profession. People are right, like, oh, what does that do to independence? Well, the reality is, I'm sure you're not acquiring firms that are doing, public company SEC audits and things
Right.
like that. But I think that kudos to you.
Thank you.
Kudos to what we've seen so far, because it's enhanced the quality and made CPA firms better. That's my honest.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the partners who come into, our group, that is one of the main considerations. And they are clamoring to say, hey, I would love for some help here. I'd love for some resources around this. Like they know, right? And it is, if you think about 5 or 6 kind of core, tailwinds that are driving this, that is one of them. I mean, nobody loves a peer review, right? And so when they say, oh, you have a team that can, kind of really do that annually as a self-assessment and help us prep for the actual one. And then, again, this internal quality control. And when, they hear that there's a risk committee. So when like things bubble up and there's some question on treatment or approach, that you can actually go to a broader community and group that is, one step closer than like an alliance or online webinar, right? I mean, it's an in-house vested group in to the good outcome that everybody wants. That's a huge selling point and a driver of why folks want to drive or join our group.
And that's awesome. So you're doing your own internal inspection, and then
Yep.
obviously the difference between, I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think veterinarians, medical doctors, or dentists, I don't think there's anyone ever that comes in and does like a peer review and says, you know what, that filling you're putting in before you, applied the adhesive, you should have blown more air on it.
Right.
We have not only, obviously now all firms will have their own inspection process, but the great firms that do have internal inspection, and then you have your peer review. So you do have other people coming in, taking a look, and there's no secret. There's a list and we get it. And there are firms
Yeah, sure.
that have been dinged by peer review because they haven't done what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So,
And that takes time to do that work. I mean, we run I mean, we have a woman, Tara Nicholas, really brilliant, with a strong background in compliance, who's built risk models and assessments. So even, pre-close, we're helping the firm saying, hey, here's how you stack up against ours. And yeah, we might have some work to do that might take a little bit of time to do it, but we're getting everybody on board pre-close. Post-close, we're doing those assessments. And, it's something, again, it's just deliberate because there's capacity and bandwidth and space to be able to actually think about it.
Yeah. Well, Reyes, as we wrap this up, first of all, thank you again. And, I think we're very much in alignment with potential issue, but not what we're seeing in our world.
Sure.
So good question, but not what we're seeing. And there's certain reasons. So anything you'd like to just share before we wrap this up? Any final thoughts from you?
No, I mean, I would just echo what Phil said. I mean, I'm such a supporter of what's going on. I'm really excited about it. The folks that I've met across the conferences and shared stages with, I think are high integrity professionals. They're trying to do the right thing. And again, I think the firms who are exploring it, it's so beneficial for them to get out and just talk to a lot of folks, because again, there are different flavors, different approaches, but to kind of a blanket say this is going to be a degradation to quality is not fair. And I'm so excited about the future and just glad to be part of it
as well. Phil, any final thoughts?
No, I'd just like to say, looking forward to continuing to help drive the tremendous success you've had at Platform Accounting Group.
Thank you.
We love working with you and your team. Thank you for providing a beautiful Salt Lake City. I think that's where you're out of.
I'm very
drop there, and looking forward to having you guys come back and do more sharing about Platform. We'll do a deep dive together with Noah and you guys. Perfect. So real pleasure having you here, Reyes.
Thank you.
If you like this, give us a like, follow us if you have a comment. And again, we're here to help. We've seen it from the inside. We've seen not only a transaction, we've seen 2 years after a transaction and have talked to the same people. But I think all of us are not seeing any quality degradation and really not on our vision of what's possible, right? Things could happen, but not what we're seeing and not what we think we'll see. So everybody, thank you for spending some time with us. Reyes, again, big thank you. Go crush your day, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Everything CPA and Private Equity. Every episode brings fresh insight. However, there's always more to talk about. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you watch podcasts. Have a question or topic you'd like us to cover? We'd love for you to reach out to us. Together, we will help you navigate this dynamic landscape so that we can help you achieve your goals. Until next time, keep making moves that matter. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.